Getting old isn't about being practical, is it? It's about continuing to dream and to grow all the way to the end.
Hi again, everybody. This is Heartbeat, featuring insights from Landon Saunders that focus on how to live a life that loves to happen. On today's episode, we've gone into the archive and pulled a talk that Landon gave to a group of professionals in the early 1990s. The question that he zeroes in on is, what does it mean to be a human being? This is part one of a two-part series, and in the next few minutes, Landon suggests the three transitions that every human being goes through on this journey. So now, let's get back to Landon Saunders.
All of my life, I've been consumed really with one question, and that one question is what it means to be a person. What it means to be a human being. What it means to live. I've found no question that's ever been as engaging, no question that has ever demanded as much as that question. And I'm going to talk about that as this message unfolds today, what it means to be a person. If you could take just a moment and go to the last day of your life and ask how you would like for your life to come out. What would you like to feel on the last day? What would you like to think on the last day? What would you like to be the thoughts that would fill your heart on the last day? What kinds of connections would you like with the people that have been important in your life, those you've loved the most? What would all of that, if it were in the most ideal form, what would it be like on the last day? In other words, it's a way of asking, how does one live a well-lived life? How can my life feel on that last day? That it's been significant, that I've not been a big zero in the world, but that my life counted and counted for something that was significant and something that will live on in the lives of other individuals. How can I go about doing that? Not long ago, I spent some time in Florida with the last living relative on my father's side of the family, my Aunt Mildred. Aunt Mildred is 84 years old. She's a very large person and spent all of her working years as a county nurse, first in West Virginia and then later in the state of Florida. Aunt Mildred has gone through many, many things in her life. She's suffered many things. She was blessed with a good marriage. My father's brother, although she told me that my Uncle Raymond wasn't perfect. But then she paused a moment and added, but then neither was I. She lost him a few years ago, and the ensuing years have been very, very difficult for her. But here's this remarkable lady who has stayed so alive. And she's so independent. She wants to do everything for herself, even drive when I'm there. It seems perfectly logical to me that when a person my age with good vision approaches an automobile and an 84-year-old woman with impaired vision faces an automobile, it should be clear who is to drive. But not with Aunt Mildred. She insists that her car knows her and that her car knows the way she wants to go, and so she always drives at my peril. But I guess there are worse ways to go than in the front seat of the car of a favorite aunt who is staying alive all the way to the end. Getting old isn't about being practical, is it? It's about continuing to dream and to grow all the way to the end. I asked my mother how she managed to survive. My mother had many hardships, particularly as a little girl growing up. Her mother was a very abusive woman. I don't know what her childhood must have been like. My mother was rejected by my father's family when she married him, rejected in such an unkind and cruel way. It took many years for her to overcome that. After my father died, I asked her how she did it. A person with no education, she had to leave school early in the third grade. She was a principal provider for 13 children in her family. She had to kind of dig and claw her way through to become such a remarkable and elegant lady. She once told me that you don't have to win, Landon. You only have to love. And when I asked her, how did you do this? How did you get through all of this? She said, I just got up each day and went on. Again, I asked her, I said, Mother, could you describe to me how you dealt with self-image? I mean, you were sort of beaten up as a little kid and you worked so hard and had so much toil. And Mother would always try to answer my questions, and so she tried to answer that one. And she started out, well, she did this. I told her, I said, when you look in the mirror and you see your image looking back at you, how did you feel about yourself? And she tried so hard to answer. It was going nowhere. And finally she looked at me and said, Landon, you must remember, that was before psychology. Bit of wisdom in that, isn't there? I think sometimes when we think about our journey to be a person, there are so many things that can happen to us. There are so many things that can distract us and disturb us. There are so many things that become traps and snares. So that once cuddly little child that was held in the arms of a mother that cared, it gets chipped away at. And it gets deformed. Its spirit gets troubled. And it suffers from worry and anxieties and depressions and losses and diseases and setbacks and failures. That so many things happen to this little bundle on its way to becoming a person, on its way to becoming a human being. And the poets and philosophers of years have tried to come up with ways to help us imagine what life is like, what a human life is like. Sometimes we go to animals. Walt Whitman once said, if I had my druthers, I'd just live among the animals because I never heard of a cow that waked up in the middle of the night crying over her sins. When we think about all the things that can happen to us and the burdens that we bear, which can take away our lives, which can reduce and diminish us from becoming the person that we were designed and meant to be and that we want to be, I think the camel is a helpful symbol. Now, we've all either seen camels or we've seen pictures of camels. There's probably maybe nothing uglier in the world than a camel. And there's no way to straighten one up. I mean, what would you do? Where would you start? Someone said you could take off the humps, but if you took off the humps, then you wouldn't have a camel anymore. And yet the camel is such a fascinating creature, and particularly in the Middle East, because the camel is a somewhat obedient, kind of so willing. It just comes up and on command kneels. And you just start piling the loads on the camel. And you almost can't pile too many loads on the camel. And then as soon as the camel is all loaded up, it struggles with its feet and goes galloping off into the desert, goes galloping off into the arid places. And sometimes as human beings, and especially those who have the most willing hearts and the most sensitive hearts, say to the world, load me up. I can carry it. I can do it. And we all like to be able to do it. We all like to feel that we can have a spirit that is strong and a spirit that is able to just take anything that comes our way. We can add any list of responsibilities, any list of burdens, any list of setbacks, and all of us like to believe that we will be able to handle that in a way that keeps us moving forward and keeps us growing. But those lists can become problematic. And sometimes we become so busy that there's no more time to reflect. Our life is our to-do list, or our to-be list, or our wanna-be list. And we go around and around in circles. And that can consume a number of years in our lives. You reflect on your life for a moment. What it's like from morning to dark. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands of how many of you are busy. Could you have ever imagined that you could be so busy? And when you look at all the things you're busy about, aren't all of them important? Are there any that you could just X out? Well, perhaps there are some, but if you are overloaded, if you are overburdened, if you have too many things to do, if you're carrying too many responsibilities, first, I think that tells you a great deal about the kind of person that you are. And I think it's a good, willing, sensitive kind of person who goes about that. But the problem is that somewhere out there, after being so busy for a period of years, there's another kind of burden that begins to creep up. And it's a little still voice that comes up on the inside of us and that begins to ask, what about you? You do all these things for charities and for schools and for children, for family, for extended family. You take care of all these projects. But what about me? That's an important time in a person's life. It's a good time in a person's life. What about me? What about my sense of life? What about my own sense of humanity? What about my own sense of soul? What about who I am and what I want and my hopes and my dreams? All of those things, however they are stated, really add up to the same thing. I want a significant life, and somehow I move along and I look at all my busy lists and I'm asking, now, does that really add up to life? Now, the camel phase of our life is a good one because bearing burdens helps us to be a person. Someone said the greatest burden any of us has is to have no burden to carry. But a change has to happen. A sort of metamorphosis of the spirit must take place. And we move from the camel to a bit more of the lion spirit. The lion looks at all of those burdens and all those responsibilities and all those shoulds and all those oughts and all those thou shalts and all these different ways that we've had to make up our lives. And it begins to ask for a little solitariness, for a little silence. The lion is not such a social animal, is it? He stalks, he's fierce. He insists on having his way. He's the king, the queen, dominant, overbearing, frightens the daylights out of everything that comes around, stalks and queries and moves, paces. And somehow in the midst of all of it, there's something glorious and something regal. Something that's fascinating and something that attracts our attention and holds it. Every single one of us must experience that. And that voice that says, what about me, is a perfectly legitimate and right voice, no matter what anybody says. It is, after all, your life. The voice that says, what about me, is that attempt. It's that first inkling of trying to find my own voice in a deeper and richer and more profound way than I ever have. But even that's not enough, because our place in the world is not to dominate, but to create. And to do that, you must move to the third transformation, which is the little child. Because the little child is about creation. The best human beings on earth are the human beings who've passed through a lot of valleys and crossed a lot of mountains and have endured a lot of losses and maybe scored a lot of triumphs. And they've wound up with an amazing sense of innocency about them. The little child doesn't know all the things that it shouldn't do. The little child doesn't know all the ways that won't work. The little child doesn't wake up into a world that's just bored stiff with all the routines and the ruts of life. Great human beings have to get to that place. They have to get to that place where they no longer look like or sound like, and especially to our kids, and especially if our kids are in their teens, You just can't sound like you've been everywhere and known everything. There's an amazing amount of innocence and trust and newness and new beginnings that keeps us alive and that keeps us awake and that keeps us attractive as a human being and that make even our kids marvel when they see us. The camel, the lion, and the little child. These are the transformations through which we must go.
Well, those three transformations, the camel, the lion, and the little child, those set the stage for part 2 of this conversation, where Landon will continue to dive a little bit deeper into what it takes to live a life that loves to happen. We hope that today's episode has delivered some helpful ideas for you. And if the answer is yes, then we hope that you'll take the time to subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcast information, and even take time to leave a comment if you're moved. This helps as other people are looking for the same kind of information. This podcast is made possible by Friends of Heartbeat, who invite you to find out more about Landon's content by visiting the website thisisheartbeat.com. And until next time, this is Heartbeat, the podcast.